voy a presentar a la persona que va a moderar este evento. Ella es Dawn Lagens y tengo su bio en inglés, así que ya pueden activar su traducción, la traducción simultánea, perdón. Dawn Lagens is the Interim Executive Director of Planned Parenthood Global, an expert in residence at IDEO, the world's foremost human-centered design and innovation firm. In those roles, Lagens works globally with partners, leaders, and creators to plan, prototype, and scale powerful and responsible programs, organizations, and technology. She's a co-founder of the recently launched Billion Girls Collab, and a girl-driving global research and development platform to strengthen long-term health and economic outcomes for women and girls. From 2011 to 2018, Dawn provided leadership, strategy, and inspiration at the Executive Vice President and Chief Brand Officer of Planned Parenthood Federation of America and the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. Her leadership cut across the entirety of the organizations, directing the expression, extension, and protection of a world-class women's health care brand, alongside overseeing the daily advocacy, communications, policy, litigation, and political work for the organization. So, Dawn, if you are there, the panel is yours. I'm sorry for my poor English.
No, you have wonderful English. I'm sorry that I don't have Spanish. So
welcome to this panel.
you can hear me though fine? Yeah. Okay, yes. Great. Well, first, I just want to say thank you. And I'm sorry that they gave you such a long bio and you all had to suffer through that. But we'll go on anyway. And how about those idea prize pitches? I was enthralled. I just thought they're amazing. And I of course, want to vote for all of them to go forward. And I know everyone will keep going forward, but we're excited to be part of that. So welcome to our panel on the most important investment. The name of our panel is actually in recognition of our very first keynote back in 2017 in Ecuador, when a friend, Natalie Molina, set forth a challenge that there did not exist a more important investment in the world than that of sexual and reproductive health and rights, as it has a guaranteed impact on so many millions and millions of lives and on progress for our entire world. And so the question before us today is, how can impact investment funds help boost the ecosystem for reproductive health and rights in Latin America? And to begin to delve into that question with us today, we have some of the most exciting pioneers and leaders in the field who are going to share about how you can actively integrate a gender approach into an investment portfolio, and how we can continue to push the ecosystem along so that it really recognizes sexual and reproductive health not as just a good, but an excellent investment. So let me just tell you a little bit about our cool panelists. First, I'm going to highlight Nancy Swanson. Nancy is a founding member and the executive director of the Linked Foundation. It's a private foundation that invests in solutions that improve the health and economic self-reliance of women in Latin America and the United States. And Nancy is a longtime collaborator with the IDEA Initiativa. So welcome, Nancy. Then we have Megan Stevenson-Krause, who is director at Inca Ventures, a fintech-focused VC fund based in Lima, Peru. And before joining Inca and moving to Peru, Megan spent 5 years working in both nonprofit and VC in the San Francisco Bay Area. She's also a founding board member of We Invest, the first community for women investing in Latin America. So that's super exciting. Welcome to you and for all that good work. And then we have Patricia Sáenz, who is founder and managing partner of AWA Capital, a regional VC fund with a gender smart approach. I love that term, gender smart approach, committed to narrowing gender inequality in the region. And Patricia has over 15 years of experience as an entrepreneur and as an investor, and she has staged more than US 60 million of foreign investments in Colombia. So doing tremendous work also. So boy, what a panel. I can just say, I want to just say a couple of words, that just kind of tee up for all of us the need, right, to invest in SRH. Although nobody on this panel or call probably needs to be convinced, but we just know that first of all, sexual and reproductive rights influence both the daily life and the destiny of people around the world. And we know that a lack of sexual and reproductive health access is a drag on individual and community progress. The toll of unsafe abortion, limited access to information and services, restrictive laws, and stigma all limit, when you put them together, how much people, families, and whole countries can thrive. And especially when I think about our young people, because we heard so many of those pitches are really going right at this, which is our young people can't drive the region forward if they can't determine their own sexual and reproductive path. And it's so closely linked, as we know, to educational and economic success. Finally, I'd just be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge that still very much in front of us is the COVID-19 impact, right? Which has really impacted access to services and, of course, very sadly and dangerously exposed women and girls to more violence. So many reasons to get in here with our impact investing and our philanthropic investing and change the direction and open up access. So with that context, Nancy, let me start with you. Tell me about how the Linked Foundation is working to improve access to women's health generally and sexual and reproductive health specifically in Latin America.
Great. Thank you, Dawn, and the Impacto team for this opportunity. I'm so glad to have this conversation going on at the conference. We are just briefly a private foundation, and for the past 15 years have been investing in creating access to health services in Latin America through investing in market-based approaches that are creating access to not only healthcare, but economic opportunity for women. So we've always had women at the heart of it's the DNA of how we think about it. We see the intersection between poverty and health. If a woman gets sick, she gets poor in this vicious cycle. So where are those opportunities for women not only to be participating in these social enterprise businesses, but creating access, and we target those women that are the most vulnerable. So we've been really, I'd say, kind of at the pioneer thinking about, we're a spin down foundation. We have another 20 years. So we've had this sense of urgency about our work and how do we use all of our capital that we have within the foundation's purview toward this mission. So, and I can talk about the different types of capital and the reasons where we use it, but we've been primarily focused on providing access to capital, both, what is called blended capital or finance. So we're taking both grant and debt, and in some cases equity, in more of an earlier stage social enterprise. It can be a for-profit or nonprofit that's working toward, we've looked at health in general, at healthcare companies and nonprofits that are serving women. We really looked at kind of products and services that are reaching women initially, and then we've been deepening our kind of the gender lens that we use when we are scouting for healthcare companies and nonprofits. And then we've actually deepened into women's health, especially given the pandemic hitting, and then looking at our own needs for access to reproductive in the United States with our previous president and the impact that he had around the world with the global gag rule. So we really started deepening, thinking about women's health, prevention, maternal health, reproductive health. We know when women have control over their bodies, they have control over their lives. And so it's the one lever that they can pull. And it's been really exciting because we've been able to take that risk in more early stage innovative healthcare models, knowing that some things won't work, but in most cases we're actually starting to see success in terms of scale and impact. And we're an impact investor, meaning we care about the impact and not the financial return. We'd like to see that the funds that we're using will outlive our foundation so that there's a sustainable pathway, whether it's covering operational costs or it has the ability to be profitable. And so we've been doing it with another co-investor over the past 7 to 8 years. And with this last stage, we're now partnering with New Ventures in Mexico, who will, I hope, continue the work for us in a project called Empodera 360, which is taking a study that we did with the William Davidson Institute 2 years ago, and we were able to share in Quito, that did an impact investing landscape for Peru and Colombia. And now we're broadening that impact investing landscape for women's health with New Ventures, taking a region-wide approach. And within that, taking 10 healthcare or women's health ventures that will be a part of this endeavor so that we can provide technical assistance and really understand the market and potential opportunities for impact investing through these companies. And then I hope at the end of this project, in the beginning of next year, there's an opportunity to create a fund or the financing vehicles that meet these companies and organizations where they are. And there's no greater need than health right now, in my mind, in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. What a great tee up to turn to our other panelists. And Megan, you have a very interesting set of experiences in the Peruvian Private Capital Association, some of the other things you've been involved in, the We Invest piece of the puzzle. So kind of looking across those roles, where have you seen investors finding opportunities in companies addressing women's health issues, but maybe in your case, even more broadly, women's health, economic, like, is there a mindset coming along that women are a marketplace, that women's needs are a marketplace? And again, as Nancy said, we need the different types of capital, blended capital, we need a continuum of capital. So just launch us into that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that's something, Don, that you didn't mention, but we talked about before, was also that, prior to entering the world of venture capital, because Inca is a finance first fund, but we're very conscious of the impact that any investment has. And we want to make sure that we're having a positive impact and not a negative one. But I actually from the nonprofit world, as was mentioned when you were talking about my bio, and most recently worked at a gender equity nonprofit in San Francisco that was making grants to grassroots organizations in all over the world and in San Francisco, New York, called Spark, that has now become part of the with. And so I very much, bring that perspective with this work. And I mean, is there a market? 85% decisions, like consumer buying decisions, are made by women, right? So there is absolutely a market. But most of the people who decide what those products are men. And in fact, to go a little bit more into the health side of things, it's something that, and this is anecdotal, I don't necessarily have data on this, but anecdotally, one of the things that I've noticed is that even as we're starting to see more like femtech, like female health tech startups, within the last year, I suppose, we're seeing more of those have female founders, but actually, at the beginning, many of them had male founders as well. And that was very frustrating from an investment perspective, like just because we can acknowledge that perhaps there's a product that would be beneficial for us to have in the market for women, but personally, I would much rather invest in a female founder, doctor, who's building that product than in a man who's building it for women. There's the concept of being customer centric and of building solutions for a real problem, pain point within the venture capital world and entrepreneurial world. And part of that is also understanding the pain point. And when we're talking about women's health, yes, men can, at times empathize, and perhaps their sisters, their mothers, their wives, their partners, their daughters, they're never going to have the same experience that we do. And so, it's something that I'd like to see more of, and I do think we are starting to see more of, is female founders in this space. And certainly something that, and Patricia has been part of this as well, as Patricia is also a member of We Invest, that we're trying to do within this space of bringing together these women who are investing in LATAM, is mapping out who has this gender lens, who's controlling the money, who has decision-making power in these funds that are investing in startups in Latin America. And so I certainly think, and just one other thing to add to that is Samsung talks about the next billion consumers, and that they're going to be in these sort of emerging market areas. They're not going to be men. There's already more women in the world. Most products that are out there are being sold to men as they are. But as I said before, 85% of consumer decision making is done by women. We're doing the buying and we are running the households. And so, I think it's very clear that we need to be also, women invest more in women. We're 3 times more likely for a female investor to invest in a female founder. Women are more likely to build a product for other women. So yes, there's a market. Yes, I think there's an increasing recognition from investors that we need to be investing in solutions for women and in female founders that are building these solutions. And I also think that there are more female women who are, I don't believe there's a pipeline problem. I think it's more about access to networks. And so I think that there are more and more women who are getting access to those networks and who are going out there to find them and lift them up, and that we'll see that in the coming years.
Patricia, thank you, Ming. I think I'm going to actually skip a question I was going to ask you and go right to another one and then come back to it, because I know that you told me that 10% of AWA fund is backed by women. And I'm curious to know how that happened. Who decided? Was that you? Were you said, we're going to do this? How hard was it to do? And how's it making a difference?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. So yes, it was a strategy because, the AWA has a gender lens approach, which is we want to promote more women in the startups at all levels, and to help also founders and promote all the gender. And I was looking here in Colombia and in all Latin America that more women are always, high level corporates are talking about how, mentorship and to promoting women in the board of directors. For example, here in Colombia, there is one group that is called Women in Connection. And they have over 70 members, and they are all really high level people. And then I came to one of them and I said, hey, listen, what I have found is none of you invest, you do the talk, but I mean, you have to put your money where you put your mouth. And one of the things that we have found is yes, there are not many co-founders or founders women, but at the end of the day, also, there are not women investors, as there are not GP women making decisions as Mega and I. So it's the 3 gaps that we have, no? So I was in AWA, okay, well, I am the decision maker with my partner, who is also a woman. So I was okay, we have this, we have the gender policy, so we have that check too, so we need women. And I started to call them, and it was very, very impressive because, as I mentioned to you, they are presidents of MasterCard and all that stuff. And then what I found is like some of them, they didn't, it's like the first time that they have like this kind of investment, you know, no one asked them about this before. And they have like plenty of office and you know, 3 apartments, and they have like the over no diversity at all, just like in real estate. And they were very like happy to be part of this. Right now, actually, we have like 12% of the fund, and now I said like, okay, we are going to get for 20% of the fund. But it's, and the other thing like they like a lot, and the idea of EWA is also because we participate, we take an active role in the investments we make. And I think like all these people high level that have been working in the corporate, they have all this network that these you know, entrepreneurs need, and they also have this experience in the corporate level, so they can have an active role. And one of the things that we have is to have this empowerment in the startups where we invest, and we want to run them with them, you know, with the woman investors, so they have an active role, and they have and they can have this experience. So that's how it became. And right now, everyone is very excited about that strategy. And yeah, I have more like than 20 investors, women investors.
Fantastic. Well, you've reminded me, and there's somebody I want to introduce all of you to who's a friend here in the US whose name is Lindsay Taylor Wood, who thinks a lot like you guys do. And I remember her now, you reminded me, her saying one time, women get asked to give and men get asked to invest. So, you know, women, it's like, hey, make a contribution. And then, but men more generally, hey, come into this deal, right? And so she also, like you, a big believer that also women need to be asked to come in and be part of investments, right? You can't barrel your way in often, right? Maybe a few of us can, but in general. Let me push on one more thing, Patricia, which is, I know you invest with a gender lens. How much of that, or where have you seen the opportunities, particularly as Nancy mentioned, have raised in sexual and reproductive health? Is that an up and coming area of interest, or have you seen some successes?
Well, one of the points that we want to invest is in a health tech, because we believe like through health tech is like a great opportunity, you know, and you can, because, well, let me tell you a little bit about our investment thesis. So we invest in early stage companies that have like through technology, they solve a socioeconomical problem. And that, and that taking in mind that are scalable in Latin America, then you come to health is one of the points, key points in Latin America, and education. Those two are like all together, you know, because it's like health and education is something that you have to come together. And we make an investment in the first fund that is called Undoc3. And that company, I think like it's one of our best investments. It's a health tech platform where you connect doctors with patients, but also where you get information. And one of the reasons why we invested at the beginning in Undoc3 was because 70% of the people that go to the doctor, they just go for information, you know? So you go, you have there people that it's like what they need is information. It's not that they are sick. So just think about it, like through technology, you really can provide that information. And Undoc3, for example, they did, in terms of reproduction, they did for EFSE, which is the Colombian, like the Colombian entity that has like in charge of the kids, you know, the well-being of the kids in Colombia. And one of the things that they did together is like, why was like the teenagers' pregnancy? Like, how could we work for that? And what they found was the real reasons, you know, not what they expected to find, because it was very much that they were expecting, for example, that they didn't know how to use the anti-concepts or something like that. And what they found is like and it's very sad, but that's when I come to education. It was, and I'm sure like Nancy knows a lot of that more than me, but what they found here, it was like one, it's like the part of the society, you know? So probably in the regions, when they are 16, they really want to have kids because they believe that that's the way to attract the guy and to be with them all the rest of the life. And the other thing is they knew about the anti-concepts, but they didn't want to take it because the girls were concerned about they gain loss or they will get, you know, like acne in the skin and all that stuff. So what they found is like, hey, it's another way we have to talk to them. It's not like, hey, use a condom. It was like, let's talk to them in another way. I mean, like taking care of a baby 24 hours, it's not something that you're willing to do when you're 60. You should be doing something different. So yes, in terms of answering the whole question is like, I believe like there are a lot of potential in health. I believe that education and having these kids, you know, doing the right thing at the right moment, it's key for the development of the region. And it's something that we can work together. You know, it's just education, 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 education. And we have seen that there is like great opportunity right now in all terms of health industry.
Great. Thank you. Ming, moving back, and I'm bouncing across my screen here, but are there some other ways, just continuing this conversation a little bit, that you think we can improve the gender balance among investors in Latin America? And I'm sure it's, you know, each country is a little bit different as well. It's not just a, you know, one size fits all, but I'm curious of strategies. You know, I was thinking as Patricia was talking, like, oh, you know, do we have investment clubs at university for young women to start to put together little pots of money and you know, begin to have that mindset, as I think we're saying, and know that this is something you should be able to do and should be excited about. But anyway, I'm just curious how you think, what are some of the strategies that might be deployed to bring even more gender balance to investing?
So I think that's a really great question. And I think personally, something that I've noticed is that in Latin America, there's a real bias towards investors needing to have had some kind of background in finance. I have zero background in finance. I'm great at maths. I can, you know, analyze a startup's financial model, and, you know, but I have not studied finance. And I actually would say, I think that is a good thing. I look at things differently. It's not that one or the other is better, right? It's just that if we truly are going to be good investors, we need to be looking outside of the norm. We need to be looking where no one else is. And so that also means we need to have a diversity of perspectives, whether that's gender, racial, socioeconomic, education. And so when we're looking so specifically for, you know, this needs to be a woman who studied economics and finance and then gone and done investment banking and or consulting, management consulting, and then we will maybe they'll become an analyst, because VCs, like, everything has to no matter how many years you've spent in your career, but outside of venture capital, you got to restart once you enter VC. I actually think we should be looking at that a little bit differently. It's great to be to have, you know, more women at entry-level positions in funds, but what we really need more of is more Patricias who are running funds. We need more of like Patricia and her partner in EWA, because what we see right now, and again, I understand this is a little bit of my, like, I guess my friends call it like my smash the patriarchy personality, but while I believe that it is a step in the right direction to be promoting women into partnership roles in existing funds, the reality is that there is always going to be a different power dynamic between founding and partners that join later. And without going too into the weeds of what does that mean to have a setup of a fund, part of that is because of the like percentage ownership, right, that one has of the fund. And so what we're seeing in the US, thing that I would love to see more in Latin America, is an increase in women and people who are starting, rather than like working their way up the ladder within capital, they're starting solo general partner funds where it's just them raising a couple $1 million, which can go a very long, as we know, in Latin America, to start investing and build their track record and build a larger fund. I think we need to start seeing more things like in order to truly have more diversity in our ecosystem, because we need to be sharing ownership, not just being employees in a fund.
Well, thank you for that, Nancy. I think that that kind of one of the things I wanted to ask you, I realized I kind of skipped over it, which is there's a lot of different investment vehicles or ways to make a difference here. You alluded to them, and it got me thinking, you know, because we say we need a lot of investors, we need more women in power and control and decision making, but we also need that continuum of capital that you talked about. And I wonder if you could just kind of remind us all, how do philanthropy, impact investing, venture investing, how do those things differ? And then how do they play together in, you know, kind of promoting the world we want and the kind of investments we want? Like how do they work together?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. A couple of just comments on groups that are doing gender lens investing well and are part of this movement, and in another group in the US, just for reference, because they're putting together, really looking across asset classes for reproductive health, the Reproductive Health Investors Alliance, or RIA. And it's a great example. It's what we're trying to do at a smaller scale in Latin America. We're not going to be looking so broadly at the investment in that way. But we hope with this, with Empodera 360, that we're able to look from the impact first landscape for women's health, because we think that that's where a lot of the type of capital is really required for where these companies and organizations are. But I think the Reproductive Health Investors Alliance is a great example of focusing on reproductive health and putting together the different investment tools that meet the types of needs, whether it's from advocacy or investing directly into health clinics. And it's just a great example that I hope we can find more of. And they really are building a field around investing in reproductive health. And I think we need to think kind of broadly about that so that we can pull together the different stakeholders and the different investors in the ecosystem. And then the second piece of it, which speaks to the different types of capital that we're seeing and understanding who the different types of investors are, globally and specifically in Latin America, is through the gendersmartinvestingsummit.com. And I know many are involved and are leading some of those efforts, but they just put out a Latin America and Caribbean regional brief that talks about the state of the field in gender lens investing. And there's an appendix that have the impact investing players in LAC. And I think it's a great place to really understand who's there. And, you know, when I think about the different types of capital, at least that I have the gift of finding and the greatest impact to use them for, with the foundation, we have really thought about everything from using our balance sheet and acting as a guarantor to so that US companies, nonprofits can then on lend into the developing world, focusing on women, or we just de-risk a direct loan ourselves that's in Haiti, that's higher risk, and leverage what we can in that way. We think about the utilization of debt financing for growth. I mean, there's such an enormous need for impact focused debt to really finance many of these companies that are focused on creating access to capital and creating access to health services, among other sectors. And then we think about grant capital really as being catalytic. There's obviously a great need for donations year on year for those that are serving the poorest places in the world and are reliant on that, which is their sustainable model. In how we think about grant capital, since we're working not with the poorest, but those women that are very poor, but are purchasing services or getting access to the public health system, is how do we help social enterprises? How do we help health ventures use grant capital to innovate around their business model? So they, as an example, they want to create a call center so that they can be closer to their women patients that have diabetes, and provide grant capital that allow them to innovate and take some risk in being able to do what they're doing in a deeper, more meaningful way and make it part of their business. So we think about what is the type of capital that's needed in that moment for that enterprise, nonprofit or for-profit. And I think there's and then equity when that's needed. Although we haven't done a lot of that because we've been really interested in just an earlier stage of investing and not taking away the ownership, especially when we're working with women-owned companies. And I'd say lastly, I think there's a lot of what we're seeing in the women's venture marketplace is a real need for technical assistance, as we're all talking about mentorship, coaching, technical assistance, and getting women. I don't have a background in finance either, and helping women get investment ready, and then access to what that really looks like for their organization or company. And I think there's more momentum for when funds come together. They're absolutely building in that need to go along with the capital. So that's part of what they're providing and accompanying these entrepreneurs. These are challenging markets, one of the toughest times I think any of us have seen in the world in this moment. And so what are those things, what are those tools and capabilities that these companies need along their journey? And I'll stop there.
Well, that's a great segue for flipping over to Patricia and everyone then jump in. You don't have to be called on. We can just have a conversation, but talking about that. Hello, daughter, maybe.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi to 100 people. It's pretty exciting.
But wait, Dawn, could I actually add something that Nancy made me think of when she was talking about catalytic capital?
Sure.
And the needs of sort of like venture women, the sort of like women in venture ecosystem. You asked earlier about how we could have more women investors. I think that Patricia might be able to speak to more of the specifics on this, but it is really hard to raise a venture fund. It's even harder when you're a woman. And so something that I've been talking to some people about, most actually in the US, is where they're having more of these conversations, but is there a version of some of this like catalytic capital that could go towards supporting first-time female fund managers as they're on that journey in raising their fund, so that they have something like they're not struggling to they can focus full time on raising the fund. They don't have to maybe work another side job, or they don't have to be wealthy to start a fund, which right now is very much the case, or often the case, right? It's very important, you know, you have to be able to support yourself over the 2, possibly more years that you're fundraising. And so it's just something that with Nancy talking about the catalytic capital for entrepreneurial endeavors, investing when you're starting a fund, it's also very much an entrepreneurial endeavor. And so just something to sort of think about.
Very interesting. And Patricia, feel free to comment on that. I was going to turn the conversation after you comment on that to ask you to another point that I think Nancy made was what counsel do you have from where you sit to up and coming ventures to say what you're looking for in investment ready? You know, where do you see some of the shortfalls? Where would you tell people to pay more attention or prep more, or, you know, if they want to come see you, what do they have to have gotten to and thought through? So I don't know if you have anything on the earlier point, but then maybe lead us in that direction.
I think the two things come together because, as Megan was saying, you know, all of us, this is a young industry. So at the end of the day, the first time fund, and Megan knows me for many years, I was an entrepreneur myself, you know, I doing the bylaws, everyone was asking me a couple of things that I didn't even understand, didn't know about it. So it's like, and this industry is an industry that I always said, like, we should have like 3 hours a day, you know, to learn more, because you get all information about industries, about tendencies, about everything that really you should spend like 3 hours learning. What we don't have, but we should try to find the place. And the thing, what I believe we miss, and I include myself, and I think like we miss this in Latin America very much, is, you know, believe in ourselves. And I was talking the other day with a foundation here in Colombia that is from the biggest bank here, and they got like, you know, like this a lot of money to help entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs. And she was telling me, like, Patricia, I have the money and I don't have the woman, because if they are allowed to get a loan for, I don't know, let's say $10,000, they just want 3. And why is the reason for that? Because they are not willing to take the risk. You know, the man will put the car, the house, the woman, the kids, everything to get the loan, you know? And in our case, we are like just like 2,000, because I really have to be sure that I will be able to repay it, because I don't want to lose the house. Because so basically what we're looking for is, and that's the best, most important thing, is the team. Because the team at the end of the day, for us, is like a very early stage, and we know we will have to pivot, you know. And at the end, you will have to change the product, you will have to change the end customer, you will have to change something. So when they asked me, like, how many of the investments that you make, they really accomplish the strategy they sell to you? None of them. None.
Interesting.
So, because and it's for good, for worse, for whatever, but we have to change it because many things happen. So in that terms, I think like the team has to be, you know, like really, and what Megas was asking is like really, you know, full time as an entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur, because being an entrepreneur with a side work at the end of the day for you is like you're not believing in yourself, you know, and you have to believe in yourself. Although it's kind of easy to say, because at the end of the day, you need the money to live. So I understand that you have a side job. But that part of, you know, like having experience, believe in yourself, be able to raise the other series, you know, and for example, here in Colombia, I found, and that's something that I believe like is because of our history and what we have lived like so difficult. We are like not showing off, you know, we are like very much like, oh, I'm going to do a small thing, and you don't pretend yourself. And then you go to Argentina and they really show themselves, and that they are like the best sellers ever. And you're like, when you talk to an Argentinian, you are like thinking like, I want to give them money. I really want to. And at the end of the day, it's like the Colombians are very hard workers, and they are very good sellers, but they miss that part, like the same thing in the States. I mean, the Americans, they go everywhere and they make friends in an elevator, wherever they are, in the pool. They are like always like making friends. We're very friendly, but making friends cost us, because they always told you like, don't talk to the person that is next to you because you don't know who is, and don't do this. And so we are very like nervous all the time. So that's one part that I always say to entrepreneurs is like, you have to change that chip. Be an American and Argentinian. I mean, show off. You're the best in the world, and you have to do something like that. So that's the first thing that I always said. The other thing is like clear of mind. You have to have clarity about what your business is, what your product is, what you're going to do, and be always prepared. Because sometimes they tell me like, oh, I was not prepared, and I am like, no, you're born to be prepared. You have to be prepared every single moment. So, and have clarity of what the product is, what the opportunity, your competitive advantage. So that's pretty much. And at the end of the day, for EWA, is very important is that we share our and no, I always mix NDA. No, NDA is the non-disclosure agreement. ADN. Right.
DNA.
Yeah, DNA. Right. I'm like NDA. No, exactly. And that for us is like when you were talking to Nancy, I think like, before, like investors were looking just for returns, and there is like philanthropy. I think like we are like in the middle, that we have to create impact, but at the same time create good returns. And that part of what we share is like, our gender lens, that is like, someone was asking me, and I'm like, this is not a marketing strategy. This is something that we really believe on, like bringing women on the table, all that, because at the end is like, that is such a small change with such a great impact. The impact that you can generate in the GDP, in diminishing the poverty, in your kids, like in being a role model, then the kids will have another mindset. So everything for us is like, it comes around like this power that we have.
That's awesome. Before we turn to see if our audience has any questions, Nancy, Megan, did you guys want to add anything you'd say about, what you would say to some of our up and coming, impact investment leaders and entrepreneurs here, about what you're looking for and how they can be best prepared to meet with people like you?
I would just echo, I think, Patricia's comments. I mean, we're all about the leadership team. And I think also we have to be careful about how we see men in the ecosystem. There are obviously gaps in women in leadership, and women in investing in across in every area that you can imagine. We're also seeing some progress. And I think we might, if we had for our own portfolio of healthcare companies, if we had been only screening with women, we would have missed some incredible high impact opportunities that are meeting women where they are and serving them with the products and services that they are demanding. And so I think there's a balance. I mean, we're doing a deeper dive to lift up and find women. They're there. I don't think it's an issue of pipeline. I think Megan brought that up. I think there's many opportunities as we look into women's health ventures, and I'm determined to drive this forward in the region, and demonstrate like microfinance and fintech and everything else, that we have a market for investing in women's health in the region for sure. And I think when people say they're investing, they have to name where they are. on the impact spectrum, because I think we're trying to think about capital differently to advance global development and create a consciousness about how people think about their wealth. And I think there's a tendency to think that you can get both high impact in terms of meeting vulnerable populations in return. I think in some sectors and in some markets that's possible. But I think the reality is, if you're saying I'm an impact investor, you're driven by the impact. And I think setting realistic expectations around that and working with enterprises around that to hopefully bring them up. There's a lot of great models that are cross-subsidizing and able to do that. But the reality is, working in developing markets in the realities of poverty, I think we need to be, as an investor, we need to be really, really clear. But leadership, being prepared, I think that, understanding that startups are not going to have all the things that you want at that time, and then helping them build their boards, and there's things that we can do along the way. So I think, but we always look at the team, and we look at the business model, and know that they're going to have to iterate and pivot and be along for that ride, and give them the capital that allows them to do those things.
Megan, anything to bring this section home?
No, I would just say I think we're all agreed on the team aspect. And I think that Nancy's point to impact investing is really important, right? We have sort of like two different types of funds on this panel, because Inca and Ewa, and correct me if I'm wrong, Patricia, but Inca and Ewa are, we're venture capital funds. And so while impact is important to us, we're not, maybe some products that we won't invest in because they won't necessarily bring the financial return that we're responsible for giving a return to our investors. Whereas Linked Foundation can invest in those things, right? And I think it also, this is a conversation, an ongoing conversation that I've been having with a couple of people also, is around, where can capital, and this is maybe more the impact investing capital, step in to solve for some of these like basic human needs that, at least I consider myself a social democrat. I would love if the state was able to provide some of these needs, but they're not in a lot of cases, right? And so we need to have investors willing to invest in those spaces, and entrepreneurs who are social entrepreneurs who are building those solutions for the bottom of the pyramid to, help lift a population. I would actually love to ask, and I know we were going to ask our attendees if they had questions, but I'd love to ask Patricia a question.
Okay.
Which is, if it's a gender audit that she has do when Ewa invests, and not something I haven't seen other funds do this, and it's something that actually we're thinking about. Might we do something similar, focused on more diversity more broadly? And so I'd love to hear more about the gender audit Ewa asks founders to do, and the responses of the founders, because I think something that also we often get pushed on is oh, these are early stage founders, we can't put all these, don't put too much pressure on them regarding having women on their team or what have you. But to Nancy's point, sometimes if you didn't invest in an all-male team that was going to impact women, we would have missed an opportunity. So maybe there's an opportunity in the stated time of investing to also encourage them to bring on more women. And I think that's what Ewa Capital is doing a little bit with their gender audit, and I'd love for you to share more.
Patricia, before you start, I'm just going to say to our attendees, if you do have a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat, and Vanessa's going to be helping, I think, to pull out a few of those and maybe group some of the ideas together so that after Patricia answers about the gender audit, we can take a few of your questions for this awesome group. Okay, Patricia, you're on.
So thank you, Megan. Well, what we did is like when we started to do like investment thesis, you know, with the gender lens, I was thinking like, okay, yes, my first thing is I have to give returns to my investors. So this has to, you know, make money. So we did like, okay, 40% of the fund, which will be like between 2 to 3 startups, will be companies that are founded by women or women are co-founders. But I always said co-founders, meaning that minimum 30% of they own minimum for 30% of the team, you know, so they are really decision makers, which I have seen come right now. It's like, oh, she's my co-founder, she has 3%, and I'm like, well, no, I don't think so. So that's the first thing, or that they have women in the C-level or in the board of directors, meaning that they already have, you know, this mindset of have diversity in the team, or that the final customers are women. But saying that which is like big, I was thinking like, okay, what we want to do at the end of the day, like whatever we want to promote, is to have more women in in the whole startups, you know, not only in the third level, because what you see is in the third level we're 50-50, and then in the second level it's like and then in the first level it's like pretty poor, I mean like 20% or something like that. So what we have in the gender audit is one part to have like what we call it is like an inclusive work strategy, which is like you are not biased at the moment that you are like hiring people, you know. So it's like pretty much that it's not like, oh, you're 30, you're just married, you're gonna get pregnant. Oh no, you are not getting the job. So it's like that part. I believe like it's very important that have like this. Also that, you know, it's not because you're a woman you're getting the job. Is that having the clearness for everyone. So I know what I have to do if I want to scale in the startup. And so that's the inclusive part that we call it like flexible job, that right now with the pandemic, well, it's pretty much that we all know that we can work at home. So all these parts is like to promoting that the woman really can be in the first level of the startups. And the second is like this empowerment. And this comes with the 10% of the investors that I have. And what I was saying at the beginning, that most of the times, yes, there is a gap, in gender gap, but most of the time it's because the woman they don't believe on their own, you know, on themselves. So that's the part that we have. This is empowerment in the companies. So they, you know, if you bring one of these friends of mine that they investors that they have, like she was like the vice president of Microsoft selling B2B, and you can come to this startup and give them like how to do the B2B selling, what they need, and all that will promote is like, you know, you give them the tools to really increase the position in the company and the tools that they need to have. And why all this thing about having women in the C-level? Because if you know, like most of the good founders come from working in startups. And that is what we call it, like it's going to be like what we are trying to do is like in the short term, well, in the medium, long term, is like all these women or a huge part of them, they will come and be new entrepreneurs with all these MBA as entrepreneurs that they will already hold. You know, that you will be working there, that you will know about the product, you will know about many other things. So that's like the whole audit. About what do they say? Of course, at the beginning, they are like, Patricia, it's more information. And it's not that you come with a handbook like this big, like right now we're going to do the Price Waterhouse audit. No, it's like as Nancy was saying, let's start measuring. Let's start to have a plan. And the plan doesn't have to be this huge. The plan has to be like different, and each company is different. So I cannot say like each one is the same thing, but it's like, okay, what do you do in the terms of hiring? How are you posting that what you need? It's, you know, do you have like this thing here? So, and what I have found also is like I'm telling you them is like, you want money, right? it's what an entrepreneur wants is money. Well, investors are becoming more responsible and they want to know about this. So the better you have this information already set and you can tell them, well, you will attract more investors. So if you don't believe it, as I do, then do it just to get the money. And they start to do it because they understand that that's the way to do it. So that's what we're doing in one, and I think like that's the way. And actually, what I have done in the two companies in Undo3, we started to see like, okay, how many women are like the end customers? 64%. And are they asking for themselves or are they asking for the family? No, 12% ask for the family, for the kids, and the rest of the family. Okay, so you understand. In the terms of mercado, it's the same thing. Like, okay, so if you do this, that is a grocery online, it's like 65% are women and customers. So, and who are they, and what are you really making them different? Spending time with the family. Wow, valuable, no? That they don't have to go out and do all that type of stuff. So it's like starting to create, because what I think is like it's not a huge report. It's simple, but it will allow you to understand your company. So
Don, you're on mute.
Sorry. I had the dog barking in the back. So is that something that there's a version or whatever that you'd be willing to share about the kinds of things you ask? I think it would be, everyone would love to see that or hear more about that. So you could think about that. I won't put you on the spot. That might be a proprietary thing, but you know, I know that that's something that probably other people are thinking, hey, we can ask some of those questions. I do want to get to, this is one that I think Nancy and May and you guys could also jump in on. You guys brought up the Reproductive Health Investors Alliance, you know, and that was created some time ago in the US. What do you guys think about something like this in Latin America? How to start this kind of partnership? Would it work?
Well, I'll jump in real quick. We hope so. I mean, we're about building the field in the impact investing space for women's health in Latin America. And we're doing it with New Ventures, which is, you know, one of the first impact funds. I know Impacto's doing some synergistic work, and there may be an opportunity there to partner. But with New Ventures, with Empodera 360, we hope to build a market to understand the investment landscape for investing in women's health ventures in the region. It'll be a first step. We don't know, you know, a lot of funds that we see. Health is a sector with many other sectors. There's a lot going on in femtech, which is a portion of what we'll be looking at with Empodera 360. And I'm happy to share more about the project. But I think there is, and we have to be creative about how we think about the end result in terms of what type of financing and investment will be needed in the region for the types of organizations. And they range from for-profit companies to nonprofits that are, and we're not working with the early stage, like the ideation, Dawn, where some of Planned Parenthood innovative work is going. We're working up where they're earlier stage to growth type of companies. And New Ventures already has a database of over 200 companies. Not all will meet the criteria that we're using for this particular project, but I'm optimistic that you know, coupled with the William Davidson Institute study that we did, provided, you know, on behalf of the field, looking at Peru and Colombia, and now more broadly. But my hope is that we'll be at Impacto next year sharing what this investment space looks like, bringing, as we did in 2019 to SOCAP, some of the promising models from Colombia and Peru that we're seeing to demonstrate that there are companies and organizations that are impact driven, that are reaching women with critical products and services, that are looking for capital to innovate, to grow. I think if we can keep our eye on the ball, that we have an opportunity to really bring something more collaboratively. And I hope it's not only with New Ventures, but that we're working with our other investors in the community. We work with global partnerships. New Ventures has a strong network of other investors as we do. So I really hope that, we're a small player in the ecosystem, but we really want to share. This is the unsexy work of doing the market data and looking at where the opportunities are. Everybody, where are the investments? Well, we got to go. Sometimes you got to uncover them to bring it. So I'm hoping with our last 5 years of the foundation that we can really bring our experience and do it much more boldly and much more broadly on behalf of women and their families in Latin America.
I'm forgetting what the name of the smart person who said this, so somebody will probably know, but they said it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the nurtured. And I think that's so true about the kind of businesses we're talking about. And someone else said a kind of riff on that is the survival of the noticed. And I think that's, for the work that you guys are describing, so important, right? It's unearthing things. It's helping people build, as Patricia says, the fire and the risk taking around their big idea, to know that they can, right? Because maybe their whole life they've been told they can't, right? And don't risk, and that's not your role. And so there's like this nurturing of both the business and the leaders and the investment sector, and some of the questions you all have raised, particularly like I love this question of, how do you have big impact and good enough returns, right? What does that look like? What's that, and that number may be different for different people and different funds. We've talked, Nancy, you and I, in another session about redefining scalability when it comes to some of these things. And someone asked a really good question in here, and using Colombia as an example, says, just a little over half of the Colombian population has access to internet. With the clear understanding of the importance of health tech and the interest it presents to investors, how can or will we adjust the approach to reach the people who are not going to have the technology access right now? Now, I always said Planned Parenthood should become a phone company. And then we would have phone plans, and you would have built in on your phone all of the apps and the access that you needed through that. And we were going to be having the pink phones or whatever, but nobody went for my idea. But you guys probably have some ideas about how can we make sure that we don't leave out those who face accessibility inequities.
If I may, I think the COVID played a good, and not everything was bad. So this is good from the COVID, and the part of the good is the internet access, and the technological gap is by far lower. And everyone says like we shorted like 10 years in Latin America in this part of the gap, of technology gap. I think like the government, they understand. And right now, through education that they are doing online and all that, I think like the government is doing more and more and more. And this is basically what we're doing right now with democratizing all the access, For example, in Undoc3, they have one part that it's like, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's like 70% of the people, they just go for information. And it's 1 billion of shares of search a month are like just made through Google, people asking about health things. you know, and there is no one really answering the question. Is Patricia answering, like saying like, yes, I did that with my kid, and and it's not like a doctor, you know, a real doctor. So these platforms, what they are doing is democratizing that. And for example, in Undo Tres, they have like this for free. So you go there, you ask your question, and you have like more than 3 to 7 doctors answering that question. And then if you want to have to talk to a real doctor, it's something that you have to pay at a very low value. So I think like all this, what it's coming, it's like providing all these services that the community is really in need, and this is even better and better. So it's like it's a, as I said, it's a young industry, but we are like doing it and increasing our coverage like very fast. So
So you
that's
think that
promising.
that's not going to be as big of an issue fairly soon
I
because
think it's getting lower and lower and lower the issue. You know, the access is it's more, and all the startups, they are like really solving these socioeconomical problems that is giving access to all these communities that they didn't have the access before. Of course, it's a lot to do still, but from my point of view, the governments are like working hard on that.
let me give you each a minute, like a 1 minute, like what's your dream? We get together 2 years from now with at the next idea initiativa. What has happened? What has changed? What is moving? What's your top hope?
My top hope is that we have an understanding of the investable landscape in women's health for the region and are active with investors across the spectrum in providing capital and support to many of the organizations and companies that are working so hard to reach women with critical products and services. And I believe that's going to happen.
Great.
Oh, Patricia, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, mine would be I would be investing my third fund, and I hope that in that third fund we will be investing all these girls startups, and you know, founded by women that I mentioned before about our gender audit. So, and I hope that we will be like more, no, that's basically, you know, and like of course seeing like exits of the fund too, but having this like being a lot of funds investing a lot of money, like not as reduced as we have like the lack of capital in Latin America right now. That's what I wish.
Great. All right, Megan.
I hope that there are more funds that are doing gender audits and things like what Patricia is doing with AWA. Maybe it's not just gender, it's other things. I think know that I like to, intersectionality is like my favorite word. It's very important to me that if we're talking about women, we're also talking about ethnic and racial diversity, LGBTQIA communities, people with disabilities, particularly in Latin America. Let's talk about like educational diversity, whether you went to a public university versus a private one, or you're from the provinces or you're from the capital city. And so I would just love to see, it would be a dream come true if in 2 years from now we're talking and there are many more female like founding GPs, also like Patricia, of funds, and more investors who are taking this sort of diversity or gender lens and really applying it across their investments.
Great. Well, I think it's all going to come true. I believe in you guys. All right. So, and everyone on this panel, all our attendees who are also committed and bringing this new world order, if you will. I do want to just say, like, I so appreciate all your wisdom, so appreciate your being here with us. And I made a few notes. And so just to wrap up this panel, let's see, a few of the things that I'm hearing is we need to work on both the supply and the demand side for investing in sexual and reproductive health and rights. We need to make sure we've got the companies, either if we don't have a pipeline problem, it might be that we just need to be able to see more clearly in the pipeline, right? That we have more investors, that it's going to take all of us, including our male investors and founders, but we have to give them their gender contact lenses to wear all the time, right? So they have to walk around with those in. Maybe we'll make them like a color so we can be sure they've got them in when we are in meetings, right? Yeah, let's see. Thinking about, I just think about one aspect of care, access to contraception, right? There are literally hundreds of millions of people who want access to contraceptives and can't get them. And, what a market and what a game changer if we can really make progress even in that one area, right? And
John, can I just, it was something I was thinking about saying when you asked about the dream, being in Peru, which is a place where abortion is illegal and where it can be difficult to get contraception. I have my Mirena IUD thanks to Planned Parenthood. At the time when I got it, I was unemployed and did not have health insurance. I was on Medi-Cal in California. And thanks to Planned Parenthood, I have contraception. And so I absolutely, yes, I really hope that we see more companies that are building better for women contraception. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine, when that came out about the blood clots, we all know that it is a higher percentage chance of women getting blood clots from birth control pills than it is from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, but they don't talk about that. So yes, I just wanted to
well, thanks for that.
Thanks for that.
Testify, girl, testify. We love it. And when we talk about that pipeline of companies that's going to solve this problem and bring new types of birth control and other sexual and reproductive health services, for sure at PP Global, this Idea Start program is one of our attempts to contribute at the early beginning stages of the pipeline. But we definitely really want to push on this incentivizing the investors piece. We got to expand our thinking about impact. I think that's what Nancy just hits on again and again, both immediate and long term. Fully exercising human rights means unleashing the potential that is right now bottled up by those social and political obstacles that you're pointing out, Megan. And for sure, we hope that one outcome of this great forum, it's been an amazing 3 days, and the work of the Idea Iniciativa is to shine light on this opportunity. And I hope everyone's going to stick around and hear the prize winners announced here shortly. So thank you. Let's give a round of applause to our fabulous panelists. And Vanessa, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Dawn, for your passionate moderation, and also to the three panelists for this amazing and insightful and optimistic session too, I think. Hope you can stay tuned till the end of the forum. Virtual applauses for you.